We would like to thank Reverend Anthony Jones. He had to leave, but he was here to give us our opening invocation and the grace. So we thank him for being here to help to get us started this afternoon. We would also like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Alexander Tomlin, otherwise known as Mr. Buddy, and Mr. Jimmy Johnson for preparing our food, along with a wonderful, absolutely wonderful hospitality committee that we have here at the center. I don't know about you, but I thought the food was absolutely delicious. I got up on those vegan burgers. They were totally great, so thank you all for that. Here at the center, we try our best to honor Mr. White and what he stood for. We concentrate on education. We concentrate on health, on maintaining legacies, on helping people find their ways in life and their mission in life. That is our mission here at the center. As OC said, we have, I think, about 14 programs and or services that we offer here. So whenever you have an opportunity, go on we do have a Facebook page. Kate is always sending out blogs showing pictures of what we're doing here. Just take a moment to go around and talk with us here at the center. We'll be glad to tell you what we're doing. We're very proud of our work. So I came here, hopefully like all of you today, with the same intent, to learn all that I can about Mr. George Henry White. We have several speakers and presenters who will be here to provide us with everything that we need to know about Mr. White. But before you get to listen to these great presenters, we're going to ask all of you to be participants in our program by taking a little quiz. So we're going to ask Ms. Paula Spalding, who has prepared this quiz. She's going to instruct us on how we need to do this. There's no pressure here at all. If you don't make 100, we will throw you out of the room, but no pressure at all. But she does have some prizes for everyone. So Paula. Thank you. I'm gonna move out of your way.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
This afternoon, hopefully you will find this not hard, but something cute, something good to do. We're going to take a quiz, and a lot of people don't like tests, and that's okay, but this is really not a test. It's a multiple choice quiz. So if you don't know the answer, one of the answers is right there. It's either A, B, C, or D. If you don't know, just guess. At the end of the quiz, we're going to go over the answers, and everybody in here will get a little prize. How's that? We're all winners here today, okay? All right, so it says everybody finished their quiz? Okay. So, starting with item 1, where was George Henry White born? Rosendale, correct. Okay. Number 2, George was a good student, first attending the Freedmen's Bureau School at Rehoboth Church, which was then a private teacher training school in Lumberton. He graduated from the Whiting School in 1872. The next step for George was college. He began his college studies in 1874. Which college did he attend?
Howard University.
Hey, you all know a lot. Okay, Howard University. That's where I went to school. Woohoo! Okay, number 3. What accomplishment is White most famous for? Being elected to Congress, being the last black congressman serving during Reconstruction, which ended primarily through gerrymandering, or he established Philadelphia's first commercial savings bank. This is kind of a trick question. B. B is correct. Now, C is correct as well. He did establish Philadelphia's first commercial savings bank, but he's given credit for being the last, as the most important and the biggest reason that he's famous is because he was the last black congressman during Reconstruction before it ended primarily through gerrymandering. Okay, so B is the correct answer. Number 4. White contributed to what town being established and is recognized for having done so? Whitesboro, New Jersey. That's it. And I went to Whitesboro this time for 4th of July weekend for the first time. and it's quite a lovely place. I highly recommend it if you haven't been. Number 5, what occupations did George Henry White have other than lawyer?
Preacher.
No. Oh, preacher. Yes, it says which one is false. That is correct. He was not a preacher. He was everything but, on this page, but a preacher. He was a teacher, a congressman, a banker, and a spokesperson for the black race. So preacher would be the correct answer. Number 6, why did White get run out of office in 1901? And this would be a true or false question. Because he was the first to introduce an anti-lynching bill which carried the penalty of death, and many whites did not approve of what he was doing. Is that true or false? True. True, that is correct. After leaving Congress, we're on number 7. Which of the following things George White accomplished are untrue? It's only one. Created the George White Land Development Company, or B, in early 1906 he moved to Philly where he established that city's first commercial savings bank, or in early 1900 he sponsored a bill to make lynching a federal crime punishable by death, and the bill passed the House. Which one is untrue? Correct. He did sponsor a bill to make lynching a federal crime punishable by death, but the bill did not pass the House. Okay, so that was a little tricky.
Also, he left Congress, because after leaving Congress, he could have introduced it to that, that was part of it.
Yeah. Number 8, true or false? After finishing college at Howard University in 1877, White worked as a school teacher and a principal in New Bern while studying the law under a former Superior Court Judge, William Clark. White was admitted to the bar in 1879 and then opened a law office in New Bern, North Carolina. Is that true or false? True. So anybody put true down? You got it right. Number 9, true or false? George White is credited with creating and developing an all-black town in New Jersey in 1902, which was named after George White, and it was also named Whitesboro. True or false? True. Okay, that was true. And the last question, last but not least, George White was married 4 times and he had a total of 4 children. True or false? True. 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 So how many got all 10 correct? Very good. All right. Stedman got 10 right. Anybody else? How many got 9 right? Oh, good. Excellent. Excellent. A lot of people know about George White. That's excellent. Okay. Anybody else got 8? Very good. Okay. All right. And anybody got 7? Very good. Okay. And anybody who got less needs to read the book. Here it is right there. Okay, so for your participation today, thank you so much for coming and participating in our little quiz. We've got some goodies for you that where's the box? We've got some goodies here for you somewhere. And we will find them and pass them out. How's that? Nope, not that. Those are just pins. Okay. All right, we'll find them and don't leave till you get your little goodie bag. Okay, thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you, Paula.
You're welcome.
That was a lot of fun. I don't know if you're like me, but there's a lot. It showed me there's a lot I need to know. I need to learn. So Google is about to become my best friend. For those who know me, know that I have a few loves in my life. Some of those loves are love of music, I love history, and I love finding quotes and sharing them with anyone who wants to listen to me. So true to course, I found some quotes to share with you guys today. I found this quote, and it really, really did speak to me. And it says that education is for improving the lives of others and for leaving our community and the world better than we found it. And this was stated by Marion Wright Elderman. This quote pretty much signifies the way that Mr. White lived his life. He believed in educating people. He believed that people would find their better selves by becoming better people. And we can become better people by learning more and doing more. Because as they say, when you know better, you do better. And so Mr. White was born in 1858 in the small community of Rosendale, here in Bladen County, North Carolina. I was born in Columbus County. Bladen County is in my backyard. Sadly to say, I never heard or knew anything about Mr. White until 2022, 2 years ago, when I started working here at the center. I think this is a travesty and a disgrace on our educational system. And we need to do something to make it better, to do better. And Mr. White proved himself to be a person of great courage and a person of great foresight. And I found a quote by Ruby Bridges that seems to portray his life. Ruby Bridges said, "Don't follow the path. Go where there is no path and begin the trail. When you start a new trail, equipped with courage, strength, and conviction, the only thing that can stop you is you." And I believe he felt that way, that the only thing that could stop him was him. And he went on to show us the way. We are fortunate to have with us this afternoon a great historian, Mr. Ben Justison. He's a noted and renowned author and scholar on the life of George Henry White. We're going to ask Vincent Spalding to come forth and introduce Mr. Justison. And so, Vincent, thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Ben Justison. Ben is from Pembroke Pines, Florida, and he's the editor and author of a specialized post-Reconstruction story of political history of George Henry White. He's a former journalist and businessman, a graduate of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, holds a PhD in interdisciplinary study from Union Institute University in Cincinnati, Ohio. As a Foreign Service officer, he served in the United States Department of State as an administrative officer at the Embassy in Jamaica. He served also in Denmark, Singapore, Latvia. His first book, George Henry White, The Even Chance of the Race of Life, published in 2001, was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize in biography. It was reprinted in print in 2012. So he is a forward by B.K. Butterfield, former United States Senator of George Henry White. This is a copy of the first book. This is just the first book. Then, most recent book is entitled Forgotten Legacy, William McKinney, George Henry White, and the Struggle for Black Equality, published in 2020. Other books include Broken Brotherhood, The Rise and Fall of the National Afro-American Council, 2008, and in his own words, 2004, collection of George Henry White's writings, speeches, and letters. His articles have appeared in the North Carolina Historian Review and Washington History publications. Beverly currently works as an editor. His wife, Margaret, is a native of Jamaica, West Indies. His daughter, Frederica Spencer, is a marketing professor at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and he has 3 grandchildren. Now that I've mentioned all of the customary traditional things you say about a person when you're introducing them, now I want to say the things you say about a person when you know him well, consider him a personal friend and supporter. I first met Dan in 2013. We were both living in Washington, D.C. in the Northern Virginia area. He was doing a book signing for his first book entitled George Henry White, An Even Chance in the Race of Life. And he presented information about his book, which was very interesting, and he did a book signing during that time. That was in 2013. The reason I decided to go to downtown DC to attend this book signing is because I previously heard about the book from some friends and relatives who were originally from Bladen and Columbus County. They indicated when I was visiting them in Philly that there was a book that contains a lot of information about Bladen and Columbus County, where we were born and raised, and the guy, George Henry White, who Ben Justison will be sharing information about in a few minutes, and his motivation to do research and write several books about him and his contribution to society. Additionally, I want to say that Ben Justison has been a major supporter of George Henry White Center since this building was donated by Dr. Milton Campbell and his sister Wanda Campbell Clay to establish the George Henry White Center. Specifically, Ben has done a book signing here for one of his many books. He has been a guest speaker here in support of activities at the George Henry White Center, and he published a feature article in the News Reporter, that's the newspaper in Columbus County, regarding the establishment of the George Henry White Center. I think that I've said enough about him at this time. It's a great pleasure. I present our guest speaker for the day, Dr. Ben Justison.
Thank you for that very kind introduction, Vince. You've been my good friend for more than a decade now, and you still say nice things about me. That's the mark of a good friend. And Paula, that was a terrific quiz. I'm going to make you my TA the next time I teach a class. I learned a few things. I learned also that my dog is my biggest fan. He has to come to all these sessions with me. He can't stay home alone because he's a little decrepit these days, but not too bad. It's my distinct pleasure to be back in the George Henry White Center again today. It's not too far from where my own career started as a journalist back in the early 1970s, before I ever heard his name. Some of you know of him because of his Spalding family connection and the fact that he grew up not so far from here in Welch's Creek. I first learned about him in 1975 when the North Carolina History Museum opened an exhibit on former black congressmen. And that started me on the road that ended up back where I started. So far, I've written 4 books about him. I've done much research, and I've made many valuable new friends. So today I stand before you perhaps to preach to the choir. Few of you would be here if you had not at least heard of George Henry White or the illustrious life he led more than a century ago. I won't dwell on his single greatest accomplishment, serving 2 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives as the only African American member at a time when his race was still able to vote in the South in the 19th century. You know about that. You may know of his farewell speech to the U.S. House in January 1901, in which he pleaded for justice for more than 8 million African Americans who were now facing the scourge of Jim Crow violence, both physical and psychological, and a growing sense of second-class citizenship, with the basic rights they had earned since 1865 gradually vanishing. Above all, George White was a paradox. He was an educated, ambitious, and well-spoken Southerner known all across the country, who by all rights should have continued to lead the way for all Southerners, white and black. But he was no longer allowed to set that example. He was discouraged in March 1901 as he left Congress. He was indignant, he was sad, he was angry, all at once, but he chose to remain optimistic, and that is the greatest accomplishment of all. Now, he had watched North Carolina voters lose the single most sacred right of citizenship, the right to vote, because they were illiterate, which in some cases was true, but of course their exclusion had almost nothing to do with that. It was the color of their skin and the fact that they were voting for the wrong party, Republicans, which George White was. Illiterate voters were supposed to be subject to this new law, but many of them got a free pass because they had white grandfathers who'd been able to vote in 1867. Now, very few African American voters were allowed to use that pass because they lost the vote in 1835, but that's part of the history course that I'm not going to give you today. Those who remained in the South, that time 90% of Americans, black citizens, were still living in southern states. They were still free, but only just barely, only in the technical sense of the term. They were no longer slaves, but they were now no longer citizens in any meaningful sense. The Congress refused to intervene despite George White's pleas. The Supreme Court, in its infinite wisdom, did nothing to remedy it. So much for history repeating itself. Now, for George White, this new era was a terrible catch-22. That's Joseph Heller's popular phrase for things that you can't anticipate but always reverse what you're trying to do. He told the New York Times he could still live in North Carolina, but he could not expect to be treated as a man here. He was one of the most highly educated Americans of either race, but his right to vote depended upon a small group of white men deciding whether they wanted him to vote or not. He had once been a wealthy lawyer in North Carolina, among the wealthiest early black lawyers in the state. He had even been an elected prosecutor, served for 8 years. But he knew that he could not work as a lawyer anymore because no one would hire him. He'd be lucky to find employment as a manual laborer in the new North Carolina. So he chose instead to live where he could still earn a living. First in Washington, D.C., where he lived for 5 years after leaving Congress, and then moving to Philadelphia in 1906. In part, he wanted to be nearer his new town of Whitesboro in New Jersey. His own George White Land Development Company had built the town, and many Columbus County residents moved to become the first residents of Whitesboro, New Jersey. Some still live there, their descendants still live there. But in truth, he saw Philadelphia as his land of opportunity. Now, this was 30 years after he first lived there, while he was still a student at Howard, and he was working at the Centennial Exposition of 1876. In just 12 years in Philadelphia, he accomplished as most men might in an entire lifetime. He had a flourishing legal practice. He founded the city's first black-owned commercial savings bank, the People's Bank. He was a civic leader, was a trustee of the Berean Institute and the YMCA, and he continued to have a vibrant career as a Republican Party leader. In 1916, he became the Pennsylvania's first alternate statewide delegate to the Republican Presidential Nominating Convention. He was a charter member of the city's new chapter of the NAACP in 1913. And in 1917, just a year before he died, his last appointment came as assistant city solicitor for the city of Philadelphia. Now that's a lot, but believe me, there's more, but I won't keep you here all day. Of all his achievements, I think Whitesboro was the crowning star in his personal constellation. because it was a refuge for black pioneers who were fleeing oppression in the New South. It was a place much like where you are today, provided recreating the environment of his own childhood, things that he learned at the knees of his stepmother, Marianna Spalding White, in Columbus County, next door. It was a place which brought him a vision of peace and allowed him to share that dream with others. His memory was long forgotten by historians, but lately it's enjoyed a renaissance of sorts. I like to think I've had a small hand in resurrecting the good name of a very good man. My books have at least filled in the blanks, but the truth is, he didn't need much from me. Just a gentle nudge forward from the shadows. His life speaks for itself, far more eloquently than any historian could do, myself included. Here was a man, a good man, even a great man, a statesman, a giant in every sense of the word, physically, spiritually, a giant whose day has come yet again. A century after his death, his legacy still lights the way for his race and indeed for all Americans, because he believed that you will not succeed until you help your neighbor succeed. You will not be a complete man until you help your neighbor complete his manhood, her womanhood. You must be an example, regardless of race or background, by lifting themselves up, by helping each other, which is what the center is all about, helping your neighbor, by joining together and refusing to let any circumstances block your rise. The struggle continues today, but with George White's help, there's still hope. In 1913, he promised to write a codicil to his will to say the fight will continue after I'm gone. I can't verify that. I've never been able to find his will, but I believe it. And I think that George White's spirit is here today. He's reaching out to each of you to say, I helped you by helping myself. Now, you help others and help yourself at the same time. It's, again, my pleasure to be here, and I'll answer any questions that you have. I think my dog would probably like to ask the first question. Is that right, Benji? Says, when do I go outside next? What would you like to tell? What would you like to hear? What would you like for me to tell? Come on, don't be shy.
Yeah, I'm gonna start it off. What's your motivation to write the first book on George Henry White?
Repeat the question again.
What was my motivation for writing the first book on George Henry White? I kept waiting for somebody else to do it, thinking he was such a good subject, somebody had to write the book. I waited 20 years and nobody had written it, so I said, well, I guess it falls to me. And I discovered one interesting thing about George White. He and my wife had the same birthday, not the year, but December 18th. But that took me 15 years after I met her to put the two together. One day I was saying to her, happy birthday, and she said, Ben, you know who else's birthday it is, don't you? I looked at her for a minute, like this.
Yeah, they can't hear you in the other rooms unless you speak into the mic.
Okay, so I'll have to. Uh-oh. I tend not to yell. Okay, questions, please. Just ask them now. Make my day. Yes?
I received emails from you periodically dealing with history. Could you tell us how we could sign up for those, to get those emails? What's the process that we need to do?
Is this my Substack that you're talking
It
about?
must be, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I'd have a free writing account on a website called substack.com. If you want to sign up for it, you just go Google my name and Substack, and it will call up our website. This is a combination of things about Black history, my history, everybody's history. And so you'll see me changing subjects every week. Yes?
From what I read, I don't think he was a congressman from this area. Where was he congressman? This district in North Carolina.
He was living in Tarboro at the time, which was the 2nd district. He had moved there because it was part of the original judicial district where he had served as a prosecutor. And his third wife, Coralina White, was from Tarboro. So he decided to move there when the state legislature gerrymandered the entire 2nd district and took Craven County, where he was living in New Bern, out of the district. In order to run from that district, then he had to move to Tarboro. And Jim Wren and the Phoenix Historical Society and Mavis, you have made my life so complete by helping me learn more about Tarboro. I spoke in New Bern in 2001, and I was sitting in the bed and breakfast in New Bern getting ready to go home, and I got this frantic telephone call from a man I'd never heard of saying, "Would you come to Tarboro and speak?" And I said, "Well, of course, it's on my way home." So I did.
The rest is history.
Ben, can you speak to the other 3 Black congressmen that served from the 2nd district, known as the Black Second, right?
That's correct. They were John Hyman, who was elected in 1874, James O'Hara, who was elected in 1882 and 1884, and Henry Cheatham, who was elected in 1888 and 1890. Henry Cheatham, coincidentally, was George White's brother-in-law. They were married to sisters from the Cherry family in Tarboro. And they were good friends until they weren't friends anymore. And then they finally became friends again. They got into a dispute over who should be the nominee for Congress from the Republican Party in the 2nd district. That Black district was created by the North Carolina legislature in 1872 or 3 in order to funnel as many Black Republican voters as they could into one district so they would not be able to vote anywhere else. They didn't expect the succession of Black congressmen from the 2nd district. Yes?
If George Henry White was here today, what type of individual would you envision him to be in Congress with all the dynamics happening in our society today? How would you envision him?
I think he would probably find that he had his hands full even more today than he did back then. G.K. Butterfield, who was a personal friend of mine, used to talk about the fact that George Henry White was his mentor. He didn't know him, of course, but he served, the district that Butterfield served included most of the old 2nd district. And when I met G.K., or I should call him the judge, that's what I always called him, he could see me coming. I congratulated him on carrying George White's legacy forward for another decade and more in the 21st century. We agreed that George White set the tone, set the pace, and I'm hoping that it will continue again and again and again. But in answer to your specific question, I think he would finally become a preacher. He tried to preach to to the Congress in 1897, 1898, 1899, and 1900. And no one was listening. Today, people would listen. Maybe not a majority, but I think enough that he would be able to push forward the kinds of reforms that we must have if we're going to survive as a democratic society. I think he'd be the champion. I hope. I think you've asked all your questions. You can always find out my email and send me a question if you have one. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Are you all as wild as I am? I could just sit here and listen to you all day. I thank you for that, and again, I will be doing a lot more research. We are going to do a slight transition. We have some panelists who are going to come forth, and they will be talking to us on various subjects. So we have Vincent Spalding, Stedman Graham, Earl Imes, Jim Wren, Finesse Couch, Robert Eggleston, and Curtis Hill. If you all will kind of come forth and, I guess, sit in this area right here for us, please. Oh, we have a chair. Okay. Vincent. How many of you before today knew anything about Mr. White? Okay. How many of you knew a whole lot about Mr. White? How many of you are learning today about Mr. White? I'm with you on that. Okay. So we have a very distinguished group of speakers and presenters. One of the things that I have learned about Mr. White was that he was a lifelong learner, that he was a lifelong scholar, and he was a lifelong teacher. B.B. King summarized it best when he said, "The beautiful thing about learning is nobody can take it away from you." And Mr. White never allowed anyone to take away or diminish his knowledge. At this time, we're going to ask each of our panelists if they will tell us who you are. If you have any items, tell us what those items are. Tell us about your mission and the purpose of the organization that you are representing. So I'm going to start with Vincent. And I'm going to move out of the way.
Thank you, Carol. I'm Vince Spalding. I want to start my remarks by welcoming everyone to the George Henry White Center. I'm the project leader for the development operations of the center, and I'm assisted by a handpicked group of individuals who bring their special talents and expertise to the center. Because I only have 7 minutes to speak, and I want to give deference and recognition to the members of the George Henry White Center leadership team, I'm going to invite you to visit the George Henry White website, which is ghwmemorialcenter.com. I repeat that, ghwmemorialcenter.com, and click GHW Leadership Teams, and you will be able to see who they are. I do want to mention and give deference to 3 members of the leadership team who have provided their service to the center at no charge since 2016, when we kicked off the renovation of George Henry White Center. These 3 individuals are members of the leadership team: O.C. Jones, who serves as the superintendent of the center and is responsible for the day-to-day operation of the center. Next, we have Mrs. Kate Sabata, who is a member, who is responsible for the public relations, outreach, and grant writing for the center. And lastly, we have Mr. Gerald Collins, who serves as our construction consultant and expertise. Gerald, raise your hand. The George Henry White Center was established by the Benjamin E. Spalding Descendants Foundation to establish a living memorial honoring Congressman George Henry White in his birth county. The decision to take this action was due to a news reporter with ABC News by the name of Tim Pullins doing a televised news story in response to concerns expressed by a historian by the name of Ms. Dorothy Bryant, who's a resident of Newton, North Carolina, that there was no memorial for George Henry White in his birth county, Bladen County. So that was the reason we decided to do this center. That was the catalyst. The operation of the George Henry White Center and the White legacy of empowering all people. It serves as an education center where people of all ages, abilities can attend classes on health, computer skills, management, community empowerment, and more. It serves as a venue for public meetings for the service of others. It connects citizens to agencies and businesses to gain new resources and opportunities. The George Henry White Center makes all of its educational programs, facilities, services available without regard to race, color, sex, creed, religion, ancestry, national origin, age, disability, sexual orientation, marital status, political affiliation. This center is open to the needs of all people. The buildings and restrooms have been modified to make them handicap accessible with approved handicap rails. The George Henry White Center is open to the needs of the entire community. I will close by saying that the George Henry White Center is a 501(c)(3) operation established for educational, literary, and charitable purposes. Contributions to support the center are tax deductible, and we are under the IRS 501(c)(3) authorization, and they would be very much appreciated. And we do have a box outside where you can drop your $20 or $100 bills in that box. And we do have a slideshow regarding the development of the Operations Center, which if there are time remaining, we can show that slideshow showing the construction phase, showing the operational phase, the training phase. I'll complete that remarks with what I just said, and I think Stephanie next.
First of all, I think we need to give recognition to Vince Spalding, and who read this book and got inspired on your sailboat, right? And couldn't put it down and said, you know, we need to start a memorial center for George H. White and also Milton Spalding. Continue to do that. I am a resident of Whitesboro and a part of the Concerned Citizens, which an organization that was created for the betterment of Whitesboro, dedicated to social and economic development of the residents of Whitesboro and Middle Township, New Jersey, led by Bernie Blanks. And so we've been working together over 36 years in that community. And we started off with a reunion, which brought people together. So the idea was to be able to bring people together that lived in Whitesboro, that were residents of Whitesboro, all back during Labor Day. And during that Labor Day, we would have cookout, we would have entertainment, we would have speakers, we would have all kinds of events. And so that we've been doing that 36 years. And we also have a home club there. We started John Robeson Golf Tournament, which was actually yesterday. Summer camps, scholarships, giving out a lot of scholarships, probably more than any other organization in that county has given out in terms of residents of Whitesboro, and also not just Whitesboro, but the township itself. We have a pantry where we serve food there. We have expansion of the community center, which we put a significant amount of funds into to build out. This is all in cooperation of also the county itself and the county officials, so we work very closely with them, the mayor and council members and all of that. Street lights, we didn't have street lights when we started this project. Sidewalks, we didn't have sidewalks. We didn't have running water, nor did we have sewage. So we were able to make that happen and for the betterment of the citizens of Whitesboro. So again, this is a part of the legacy project that is connected to the George H. White Center here, which is really wonderful. And he's an unbelievable man as well as visionary, and we continue to try to self-actualize his own vision of what he wanted. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
My name is Jim Moran. I want to bring you greetings from the members of the Phoenix Historical Society, African American History of Edgecombe County, and also our president here, Mavis Stith. And first, before I go into my bullet points, I want to thank Ben Justison for answering that phone call from that stranger in 2001, who was our inspiration for getting our Phoenix Society started. And I think it was in 2012 that Vince Spalding reached out to us and came to our George Henry White Day in Tarboro, and we partnered together with the Spalding Foundation on this George Henry White projects ever since. So we're very honored to be here, and hats off to what you've done here at this center. We got some slides that are going to help me go over my bullet points for what we've accomplished since 2001.
I thought I was at home, I'm sorry.
The Phoenix Historical Society was founded in 2001 with the mission to recover, record, promote the history of Edgecombe County, North Carolina, as experienced by its African American community. And we were inspired by the impromptu visit of Ben Justison to a group of people in Tarboro in April 2001 to talk about his new book on George Henry White, who was from Tarboro, and we didn't really know anything about it. So we were so excited to hear about it. And we were trying to dig more into the history of Edgecombe, African Americans in Edgecombe County. And we took our name from George White's farewell to Congress speech, like the things will rise up someday and come again. So we've been doing history, the history of African Americans in Edgecombe County from slavery to freedom. And we've done quite a bit on it since then, but George Henry White has been a focal point of our work.
Next slide.
Next slide. In 2001, after Ben Justison's visit, and also the visit of Dr. Robert Hinton of New York University, who did his work on slavery to freedom and the cotton culture, we had our first inaugural event in November 2001, tribute to George Henry White, where Ben Justison, Robert Hinton, and Congresswoman Eva Clayton were speakers. This is the news article from that, Rising from the Ashes. So it announced our entry onto the scene of historical work in Edgecombe County. Following that inaugural program in 2002, the Tarboro Town Council passed a resolution declaring January 29th, which is the anniversary of George Henry White's famous farewell to Congress speech, as the annual George Henry White Day, which we still observe. And the following year, Edgecombe County followed suit. So this is George Henry White Day in Tarboro, Edgecombe County, January 29th. Some other towns have also followed suit, but we particularly keep it alive in Tarboro, Edgecombe County. This is George Henry White's house in Tarboro, where he lived when he was a congressman after he married Corleone Cherry. As Ben was referring to, this is at 300 Granville Street. Several times we've had walking tours of black sites in Tarboro, and we always have someone recite George Henry White's speech from the steps. We had G.K. Butterfield recited, and Toby Fitch and others as part of our walking tour. Next. Under my chin. We also...
Under your chin. All right, there you go.
Right here.
Right, yeah, like Stedman.
Right here.
A little
Okay.
bit up, touch your chin. All right, basically.
Right here.
Yes.
In 2003, we produced this pamphlet, 2 speeches about George Henry White, which is not only his famous farewell to Congress speech, but a speech called Simple Justice that he delivered in Boston, Massachusetts, following the Wilmington Massacre. And this is one of our research, our educational pamphlets we have. We also produced a poster, which is with a quote from George Henry White's speech and some more information about the Black 2nd District and other black congressmen. Next slide. On George Henry White Day of 2005, the Phoenix Historical Society unveiled a portrait that was painted by local black artist Richard Wilson, and it was unveiled in the Edgecombe County Courthouse Superior Courtroom to recognize the fact that he was, George White was for 8 years the solicitor in the 2nd Judicial District, the only black district attorney in the country at that time. And so we, with the permission of the Edgecombe County Commissioners, we hung this in the courtroom. And it's probably the first time, I think, can't be that an African American portrait has been in a North Carolina courtroom. Still there today. The following month, February 2005, the Tarboro Post Office was named the George Henry White Post Office Building by an act of Congress with the help of Congressman G.K. Butterfield. And this is George Henry White Post Office. And next slide. And in the lobby of the post office, we have a permanent display. And also highlights the fact, again, of the almost 34 plus African Americans that were appointed as postmasters by George Henry White while he was in Congress. So again, we're trying to, it's a linkage between his service in Congress with the postmasters. One unfulfilled vision for over 20 years. We've been still trying to petition to get a George Henry White postage stamp. And I don't know how in the world we can't get it. We hope we still pray. One day, I don't know what it's a secret process. We tried our best to get attention, but
It's hard. It is.
but we're still working on it. We'll let you know when that happens. And then on George Henry White Day 2011, we unveiled a North Carolina Highway historical marker of George Henry White 2 blocks from his house. I have to tell you one story, but when we first tried to get this marker, they said, well, we've already got a marker of George Henry White in New Bern. I said, wait a minute now. He was in Congress from Tarboro. They said, we don't do but one per person. So we did some research. And we came back and said, wait a minute now. The 3 leaders, the 3 ringleaders of the white supremacy campaign in 1898, Josephus Daniels, Furnival Simmons, and Charles B. Aycock, all 3 have 2 markers, so you can't deny George Henry White 2 markers. So we got our marker. You can do it again. Eva Clayton was there to unveil it. I believe. Next slide. And then you can do one more slide. These are members of George Henry White's, relatives from Pitt County.
And we are here.
Oh, wow. Okay. Very good. Thank you so much. Glad I put that slide in there. Okay. Now, next. Every year, we have the audio of the George Henry White documentary, American Phoenix, produced by Latesmith Productions. It's broadcast on local radio every year on George Henry White Day. And this is you can see a advertisement there we put in the post office advertising the what time it was going. It was played twice that day on January 29th. And we have had the cooperation of local radio station to do that every year. We also had last year the Rocky Mount City government cable station played the video documentary as well. And that's you next one. Okay, and these are the points that I've gone over. This is what the Phoenix Society has done to continue the legacy of George Henry White in Tarboro and Edgecombe County.
Right on.
Next. Thank you for your help with the slides. Who's next? Earl? Earl's next, I think. Oh, the Bar Association.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for allowing us to be here. I'm Vanessa Couch from Durham, North Carolina. It's very personal and almost the type of talk and gathering that gives you goosebumps when you're here to talk about someone who's so magnificent and whose impact still affects us today and who we've not seen too many just like since that time. I have the privilege of working with lawyers in Durham who respect Mr. George Henry White and who thought of him so much as a great legacy that in 1962, our lawyers formed the George H. White Bar Association. Now, I was not there then, but I was there in spirit, and Mr. Buddy Malone and some other lawyers who were known to be famous civil rights lawyers formed the George H. White Bar Association. And since that time, the Bar Association has made sure that it helps our community. We have an annual scholarship fund. We have committees that will help with mentorship and making our youth familiar with the court in a good way rather than in a negative way, and to just make sure we work in tandem with our law schools there, because we have the great North Carolina Central School of Law there. We have the Duke Law School there. Today I have with me the first historically elected and appointed Ms. Dawn Baxton, who is our first public defender in Durham County. And she has made history by doing that. She's been a member a very long time, and she's gonna wanna take up some of this time and talk to you. So I just wanna say that when I speak to young people, I tell them that we can't afford a generation gap. There's no such thing, because if you know what little crumb you know, I expect you to express it to me, and I would do the same for you. We can't afford a generation gap. And when I hear this great legacy that's spread over 100 years and in this great place and institution that we are, and you have done a marvelous thing, Mrs. Spalding, and everybody here, it tells you that we can cross miles and we can cross age. There are no limitations on what we can do when we work together, and helping community is central to our hearts. So I want to say that in terms of what I think Mr. White would say today, we're in some same times that we were in back then as we are now. I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same. But when we see the dishonesty in Congress, when we see how unfair they were, maybe y'all didn't see the fight yesterday in Congress, where somebody was more worried about eyelashes than they are about feeding our hungry and educating our youth. But I think that the part that he said that has come true is that the Negro would rise like the phoenix, and we think that was President Obama. And so we are looking for some more good things to happen. I would like to say, Ms. Don Batson, I want to get started. Come on and say what you need to say.
Good evening. Thank you for having us here. In addition to being, my main reason of being here is not because I'm the public defender for Durham County, but I have been a member of the George H. White Bar Association since I started in the public defender's office in 1999. And the committees that our president mentioned, we make sure that we have committees that focus on helping the community. And so some of the things that we have a Black History Committee in which I'm chair of, and in that committee we're making sure that we educate our youth and our community. Now I'm certain that some of the things we educate them on we call critical race theory, we call it history. So they get to learn about those things that people don't want to talk about, don't want them to know that actually happened in this country. We let them know about Emmett Till and the Scottsboro boys, and we let them know about Joanne Little. We bring those things back to the forefront. We take children to the National Museum. We take them to the museum in Greensboro so they can know their history that they're not being taught in our schools. Because we want them to know that they are something more than what they are seeing on TV every day, being arrested for crimes and criminalized. They are smart, they come from strong stock, and they can do any and everything they want to do if given the opportunity. So we want them to know that's possible. And another way that we seek to honor Congressman White is that we also have our community outreach committee. And one of the things we did for Christmas this past year, which we were so proud of, is that we have a senior citizen community in Durham, several, but one of them, we gave every senior citizen a Christmas bag, and they were so thankful because we wanted them to know that someone is thinking about them during the holidays. So those are the types of things that we try to do to honor Congressman White and making sure that we are helping and uplifting youth and the elders in our community.
We want to thank you. We'll be around when this is over. I think that Mr. White, Congressman White, would be very interested in seeing that we have so many people who are justice involved, so that we are entangled in this legal system, and thankfully there are people like himself and who have followed in his footsteps to try to help navigate people through this very system called the justice system, which we see as the legal system. This year at the banquet, we had the chance to have an ad, and it says, "It is certain in any case that ignorance allied with power is the most ferocious enemy justice can have." And that's what James Baldwin said, and that's why I want to leave you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Phoenix Explorer Society, Ms. Baxter. Vince, thank you for everything you, OC, and especially the ladies have done here. My name's Earl Imes. I am a farmer and a historian, and going back to the days when I got involved with Congressman George Henry White, I was an archivist at the State Archives of North Carolina, and I got my hand on Ben's book when it first came out, and I was a legislative archivist at the State Archives, keeping the biographies of legislators. And that exhibit that you mentioned, the Black Presence, was at the North Carolina Museum of History back in the 70s, 1975, 76 timeframe. And I saw that exhibit as, well, I didn't see the actual exhibit, but I saw the remnants of that exhibit as a young archivist. And it sparked my interest because coming up, I had not learned anything about our Black legislators during Reconstruction. And a lot of that I did learn was literally on the job at State Archives. And so while, I'll tell you how interesting how the Lord works. While I'm researching Reconstruction era Black Republican legislators, we get a call, hey, Dr. Ben Justison is coming to us. I just read this book, this is out of sight. I got a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk to him and share with him about. But among other things, I tell people this, Ben, is that it sparked me to continue to research that led to this exhibit that you'll see over here, or parts of that exhibit that is, which is a reconstruction exhibit, almost extrapolated from that first exhibit. And so for many years, I researched not only our 4 black congressmen, John Adams Hyman out of Warren County, and Henry Plummer Cheatham, and George Henry White, and James E. O'Hara out of Halifax County. But also, I'll share with you that we had in our state 124 elected black state senators and state representatives between 1868. And I say black in quotations because as we look around the room, some of us are different hues of black. And back then we didn't call ourselves Afro-American or African-American or black even. Sometimes we called ourselves colored. And that goes back into our history. And I'll put an asterisk beside that number, 124, and I'll tell you an interesting story why. In the 1868 Constitution Convention was largely framed by the black Republican legislators who insisted, among other things, on having the level of education that we enjoy now in North Carolina. The privileges of education, which is part of a landmark case, now the Leandro case, that was inserted by the black Republican legislators. But during that process, there was a Republican legislator in a county close to here, Duplin County, who was described as really light-skinned, green eyes, and swarthy hair. And we've all seen people like that. And one of the Democratic newspapers called this person the N-word. During the 1868 Constitution Convention, they literally got into a fight on the floor at the state capitol. And the long end of it is the newspaper correspondent was kicked out of the Constitution Convention, and everyone was able to proceed with making that Constitution. But the short end of that story is that the person, the legislator who's mentioned, waffles back and forth between mulatto, white, black, mulatto, white, black. So we still have this ongoing research, but I say all this to say is, fast forward, Jim Moran, I've had the opportunity to work with Phoenix Historical Society in Tarboro, and when that marker went up, I had just come from the archives over to the museum, North Carolina Museum of History, and I went to the State Historic Highway marker folks, and I said, we should get a marker in Bladen County for George Henry White. And they said, there's no way that we're gonna do a third marker for George Henry White. Good try, Irvine. And so I said, well, Jim, why don't you come to the museum and do a presentation during our annual African American cultural celebration, which the Phoenix Historical Society did about 20 years ago. And we showed the film and had a great time. And not long after that, I think that's when Vince and I met. And Vince says, I heard you are in a little bit of historic preservation. I said, I love historic preservation because it creates equity in our community. It's a way, this building and the historic preservation investment has not only created wealth for this space, but this community. And wealth beyond monetary means, but just to have a function like this was not possible before this historic preservation. So in 2015, I think it was, 2015, Vince came by my farm in Johnson County, Picayune, came down here and looked at the house and said, this is a great house. It's perfect. And we started talking about a historic preservation plan, and Vince says, and finally, Congressman George Henry White is gonna have some recognition in his birth county. And so it's been a mission for mine in particular to help restore this and make it the space that we have now. But if I could come back to the curator historian in me, this place was filled with artifacts and documents and photographs, literally. And we came in and Vince and I and Olsen, we started going room by room looking at items. And I think we got your grandmother's blueberry tray.
Sure did. No, that's Milton.
Milton. Yeah, what's Milton?
Right here.
Yeah, Milton, we got your grandmother's blueberry tray, the sweet potato basket, and your toy top. that you used to play with, and took all those items to the North Carolina Museum of History that are now artifacts. And so I think it was right before the pandemic, we had the opportunity to put the sweet potato basket on exhibit, and I did a sweet potato exhibit, because you'll probably know our state. If you don't know, you'll know today. Passing through here, all the sweet potato fields. Yeah, our state leads the country in production of sweet potatoes. Now, I used to say the world, but they're doing something in China that's outside of the bounds of agriculture. So we're gonna stick with and Bladen County, Columbus County is right at the center of that. So to have an artifact like that to reflect that material culture, and for me, I'm also curator of African American history and agriculture as a farmer. It's really great because I want to always interpret the agricultural history that we're so prominent in this state. And so it was a real opportunity to get those items and put those on exhibit, and then continue to boost the story of George Henry White being adopted by the Spaldings, educated and so forth. And so if I can fast forward, I think it was around 2019 or 18. My hometown is Winston-Salem, and I'm a 7th generation Imes in North Carolina. And I like to talk about genealogy, do a lot of genealogy, help people do genealogy. So I was invited by the Forsyth County Library in Winston-Salem to do a Black History Month program, 2018 or 19, I think it was. And no doubt, no less at the library of the elementary school where I went to school in Louisville, North Carolina, which is serendipitous. I was having visions of having an afro all over again. And then I met another guy who had a hairdo kind of like mine who came to the show. And he says, I love that presentation with you. So we got into a good conversation and we exchanged information. And not long after that, we did another presentation, and the fellow, he called me, Robert Eggleston, he called me and says, Earl, I am the great-grandson of Claude Kitchen.
Yeah,
One great-grandson of Claude Kitchen, and that almost caused my afro to grow back. I said, really? I said, what do you have? He says, I have this picture. And it was given to Claude Kitchen by Congress when he left as the chair of the Ways and Means Committee in Congress in 1990.
But give me one sentence on who Claude Kitchen is.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that.
Okay.
I'm gonna get to that. So Claude Kitchen, if you don't know, going back to the formation of the Black Congressional 2nd District, and not to belabor too much what Ben Justice shared with us, but it was a district that was created right after the 1868 Constitutional Convention was penned. The ink wasn't even dry before the legislature in 1869-70 began gerrymandering what was called the 2nd Congressional District. Now, at that time in North Carolina, we had 25 majority counties of majority Black people, or people of color. Those counties were mainly all the counties, if you came down 95 and east, with the exception of Granville County and Warren County, and which Granville County is where Henry Plummer Cheatham's from. And so those counties were what the legislature were attempting if they could have put all 25 counties in one district, they would have. But they literally ran a district from the Virginia border of Northampton County, Halifax County, and Warren County, and ran it all the way down through Edgecombe County, Wilson County, Wayne County where Goldsboro is, Lenoir County where Kinston is, Greene County where Snow Hill is, keep coming down, and it went over to Craven County where New Bern is. And at that time, Pamlico County didn't exist. So it went all the way to the coast. So literally you had a congressional district that went from the Virginia border all the way to the Pamlico Sound. And at that time, there were 14 counties. So, Ben Justice, you might be able to answer this question for us. So, he gets a law license in 1879. 79.
Yeah.
And so, that same legislative session is when Craven County just happened to be gerrymandered out of the 2nd District. And I don't know if they had an eye thinking that this brilliant guy's gonna run out of Craven, we need to take this out. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna double down and cut off Pamlico County and create a second county in this district so that it's gerrymandered out. And along this process, what happens is our friends in Durham County was gerrymandered and created to offset that. Also, it was done to lop off the most powerful black Republican legislator, James Henry Harris, who was basically the founder of the Republican Party in North Carolina. He was a Wake County state senator representing Raleigh in the western part of Raleigh. So effectively, they took him out by taking his district away and creating Durham County. And so he leaves and goes to Washington, D.C. afterwards. But the point is that here we are now with a 14 county district that's been convoluted between 1870, 1880, and 1890. And the first representative in this majority black district was a man named Buck Kitchen, who was a former Confederate colonel who managed to get elected because of infighting among the Democrats. Literal mudslinging and talking about your mama stuff was what was going on. And so that cost the Republicans that first seat. And so a former Confederate officer, William Buck Kitchen, actually wins that seat. So fast forward, there are 4 black congressmen, as I mentioned, that come down through that district with Congressman George Henry White being the last of those. And so in 1901, after George Henry White did not return to North Carolina as Ben Justice stated, the run-up for the Democrats really were to get this majority black district that turned out that one of Buck Kitchen's sons, Claude Kitchen, one of the participants in the coup d'etat in Wilmington and the benefactors, actually wins the seat. So his outcome, his benefit of the bloody coup in Wilmington was to get the seat of George Henry White. So when Robert told me Claude Kitchen, my antenna went up, my afro came back out. I said, hey, we got to get together. And so what we have now, if I can back up and share, the artifacts are behind you. I have to ask, don't touch them, please. And I can answer questions after the program. But before we talk about that artifact, because that artifact unfortunately came after the creation of that exhibit. But going back to the creation of this exhibit, it's called Freedom, A Promise Disrupted, North Carolina, 1862 through 1901. And I completed curating that exhibit in 2018. Now follow the timeline here. In November 2018, I get a call from Ben Justice and I'm introduced to Stedman Graham about this artifact that has an association with George Henry White. Well, I'm not gonna say anything else about my afro. I'll just have to show y'all pictures of it. But it started to come back. I said, there's an actual material history of George Henry White. Ben says yes. So we go back and forth, and I said, well, I'm doing this exhibit, and I really, really would like to get it in before the exhibit deadline and the cutoff in. So Thanksgiving comes along, and we miss each other. And then the holiday season comes along, and it's December, and the cutoff for me is like Christmas Eve. That week, of course, we don't do much work Christmas, unless it's home, holiday work. So Ben calls me and he says, Earl, I got my hands on the artifact. Where would you like to meet? I'm driving down from D.C. and I'm in Johnston County, North Carolina. I says, well, we can meet on 95. Would you like to meet? He says, there's a nice Bojangles in Smithfield. I said, that sounds great. That sounds like a great place to do business. So we met at the Bojangles in Smithfield, and he brought this artifact, and guess what the date was? December 18th. December 18th, 2018. Now, that's his birthday. Is that also the same day he passed away?
No, he passed away 10 days after.
10 days after his birthday. Okay. But it was 1918. So, get this. We get the artifact December 18, 2018, the same month and week, 100 years after he passes away, and I get it into the exhibit. Literally, I got it. I took it up to the museum, registered with all the paperwork, and my registrar literally, she says, "Earl, you just barely made the deadline." I said, "You won't believe this artifact." And I started telling her, and my conservative people, they're so used to me going off on these artifacts. I said, "This is good, this is an artifact. You got it registered, it's gonna be in the exhibit." But I said all that to say is, that artifact is the ceremonial sword of George Henry White when he was the president of the Oddfellows, the Prince Hall Masons. And he actually was given that in 1890 in Asheville, North Carolina, as part of that ceremony. And it just stoked me because it's right in the middle of when he's solicitor and all this stuff, and it's just really good stuff. So we got it on exhibit, and we had the exhibit going, and the exhibit opened, as I mentioned, during COVID, but we had so much of a good response that it extended after COVID. And then the exhibit went traveling, and so the exhibit has just literally returned to the museum, and believe it or not, I received a request from Shaw University last week to put the exhibit up at Shaw University for Juneteenth in 2024 this year. But part of the exhibit and part of the panels that you see here will also be on exhibit at the North Carolina Museum of History in Raleigh on June 13th, 2024, when Mr. Stedman Graham has graciously agreed to come back to the museum and give us a keynote presentation about, you'll have to come to the museum to see. But the artifact will be on exhibit then. And I will tell you, it has been literally to the Smithsonian in DC and back. And my thoughts are that artifact is a rock star and it's going to be seeing a lot of attention. So for me to get an artifact or a document and a photograph to corroborate all of this history and research that we do is what I do to help piece it together and put events together like this. But I don't want to take up too much of my time because I want to also invite Robert Eggleston up, because Robert has been a real champion in this effort to recognize George Henry White and to share these artifacts and stories, and it even gets better. He came today with Claude Kitchen. Now let me back up. So Claude Kitchen actually served in Congress in 1901, 1923. His brother, William Kitchen, W.W. Kitchen, was governor of North Carolina in 1909 and 1913. So we're talking a powerful set of folks. So Robert has been courageous because he has gone literally against the tide to bring these artifacts out. So he comes today and he says, "Earl, I got another artifact for you." And so he's brought it, and I'll let him share it, but what it is a piece of china that shows the Claude Kitchen house in Scotland Neck, North Carolina, which is in Halifax County. So without belaboring it and further ado, I would like to introduce to y'all Mr. Robert Eggleston.
Thank you. Actually the plate is of Claude Kitchen's home, and right outside that is a historical marker. We actually, a cousin of mine that I discovered through all this process, who is up in Indiana, and 41-year-old white woman who is an African-American literature expert at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. She petitioned along with her sisters to get that historical sign of my great-grandfather and her great-great-grandfather, get that changed. She got a letter from the historical, what is the name of it that does the sign?
Historic highway markers.
Historical highway markers. Got a message from them that they were willing to change it and put context in there that he had been a party to the white supremacy campaign. Then all of a sudden the town of Scotland Neck, a bunch of my cousins, they started calling me. They said, "Have you heard about this?" I said, "Oh yeah, I'm a party to it." They didn't like that much. And so it turns out they raised such an uproar that they sent her another letter saying, "Oh, our new policy is that unless there's something factually wrong on a marker, we won't change it." And there was nothing factually wrong because it said he served in Congress and chaired House and Ways, and so anyway, we're quite disappointed on that, but that marker is right in front of that house. I'm Robert Eggleston. I live in Winston-Salem, but while I was in Wrightsville Beach a few years ago, I loved going to the old books on Front Street, which is just crammed full of books, and I told the woman there who I tried to get to come here, but she said she had to be at the store today. I said, really what I'm interested in is not just history or Civil War. I'm interested in late 1800s, early 1900s, when George Henry White was in Congress and all that. And she goes, well, you know about the Spalding Foundation, right? I'm like, no, what is that? So she wrote down what she knew. I found him online. I made a phone call. Vince Spalding answers the phone. And honest to goodness, every time I reflect on that conversation, I think about the grace that he gave me from the instant that I said, I'm the great-grandson of the man that stole the seat of your ancestor. And I say stole the seat because when you're party to an organization, the Democratic Party, that once they got back control of the state legislature, they wiped out about 96% of the black voters. Now women, this was late 1890s, women were still 20 years from getting the vote, but they wiped out 96 or 98% of the voters. And the way they did it was poll taxes, literacy clauses, grandfather clauses, as Ben mentioned. And so he waltzed into the seat, rarely had any opposition, rose up through the ranks and became fairly notable. But I think the interesting thing is, and I discovered this 25 years ago when I started reading about the 1898 Wilmington massacre. And I think what's interesting about it, I have gathered about 600 books on race, everything from Reconstruction through Jim Crow, through modern civil rights. And I'm actually going to work with Chris Paul, who's from Winston-Salem and wore a Santa suit for my Santa's Helper project when he was at Wake Forest, and create a Chris Paul reading library about that, because he wrote a great book about his grandfather and talks about the injustices through the centuries. So anyway, I just think it's interesting that of those more than 600 books I've got, 87 of them mention George Henry White, but only 53 of them mention Claude Kitchen, who was in Congress for 23 years. George Henry White was there for 4 years. So I think it's poetic justice that my great-grandfather is fading into history while George Henry White's profile is rising. And so it's been such a pleasure, and Paula and Vince adopted me seemingly from the first phone call. Paula didn't know this, but anyway, and to get to know everybody that's involved in this. And I'm involved with, in Winston-Salem, in another interesting story, a guy named Peter Oliver, who was a slave that bought his freedom and orchestrated brilliantly his freedom in 1800. And we're raising money to create a site to honor him. One of the things that I think, the thing I'll leave you with is this is a timeline I think is amazing. George Henry White, there had been about a dozen congressmen in the 1870s, 80s, and 90s. George Henry White was the last one. When he left in 1901, and my great-grandfather took that seat, it was 29 years before another black served in Congress, a fellow named Oscar DePriest from Illinois. It was 71 or 72 years before the next black served from the South, Andrew Young, who is still alive, and I suspect Stedman is a friend of Andrew Young. And then the next black congressman to represent North Carolina was Eva Clayton in 1991. So 91 years, blacks were not represented in Congress. In this state, within 70 years, the South wasn't represented. So you see what happened with the flashpoints that happened in North Carolina and other states as they took away the rights that had been legally given to them, but not actually given to them. So I appreciate being here. Thank you.
All right, so we've had some distinguished folks talking. That's right. Is that right? Everybody can hear me? All right, so y'all had some distinguished folks talking and doing all that good stuff. And I'm an old country boy from Columbus County, and I'm the president of the NAACP down here. And y'all want to know what in the world is he up here with all these magnificent folks talking about? And
they're wondering why I'm here.
and I'm thinking the same thing. Why am I here, right? But then as everybody begins to talk, because Carol just calls me and said, I got you on this panel and you're going to have to do this. And I'm like, Carol, I've got somewhere else to be that day. But Carol had already got me to do something else. So I said, well, I got to do this for Carol. But then when I'm sitting here thinking about George Henry White, I say, what a man. What a man in a moment. The question is, how do we handle our moments? And think about that, and then we're talking about 1898, right? The only coup d'etat that happened in American history. That was successful, right? Right down the road. And then you say to me, why would you be talking about that in Bladen and Columbus County. And I would offer to you that we have the same semblances of those issues right now. And that's where you're talking, and that's where I come to the conversation. You say, well, what do you know about that stuff? Well, I can peer a little bit and history a little bit for myself, and it seems to me that I know something about what they call the Oath Keepers and those kind of situations that are going on around our nation in January the 6th.
Yes.
Before January the 6th happened, and nationally, we had January the 6th over in Columbus County. And so that's why I guess I'm here, to talk about why it's so important for us to vote, right? And you're thinking about what is it about what's going on in our legislature, whether it's at the State House or if it's here at our local elected officials areas or if it's in Congress. I would offer you that this is our moment to stand. This is our moment to stand for justice, equality for all. Think about it. Think about what America can be, right? What we've experienced, and I'm probably about the youngest person on the panel, I think. I think I am, right? I look at anyway, right? Y'all gotta tell me that at least, right? But if we're thinking about it though, the moment, as we're thinking about all of the other issues that are going on in the world, right? Where would George Henry White stand? George Henry White would stand for justice, true justice, that's representative of everybody, that be fully inclusive of the world that we're supposed to be, right? That is our inalienable rights. All of us have the same right. He was a great man, right? He believed in economic development, right? We all believe in that too, right? He believed in the power of the votes. And think about it, the NAACP state conference last week, I think it was, we were in Winston-Salem talking about voter ID. So think about these things, about how surgically that folks want to take away the power of the black vote. So that tells us something is some power there within the black vote. It's something that folks don't want you to get together about, to talk about, because they understand how transformative it is in American culture, in American history, right? When folks come together from all parts of themselves together and really talk about what America is, because we built it, right? Our foreparents have done a great job of laying the foundation, but the question is, where are we going to do with it now, in this moment? Are we going to take the baton that God has given us and run our race with it? Or are we going to sit there and let these rights that we talk about so much be eroded? That's the question that we all must answer in whatever position that we're in. We've got to answer this call, how is it that I can make America true America again? Because I would offer to you that this is a moment in history, that this election, right, and we say that all the time, that every election is the most pivotal election in our lifetimes, but for real, this one is, right? Yes. This one really is, because we know what's at stake. We don't want another 1898 to occur. We don't want the erosions of our rights to occur. But then if we also understand history, history teaches us that any time that you have what is perceived African American progress, one always has this white backlash. History tells us that. But the question is, how are you willing to stand in your moment? You can know the history, but are we willing to stand to make our communities better? Are we willing to stand truly to talk to our friends and neighbors about the issues? Issues are always the same. We believe in housing, right? We believe in voting power. We believe in economic development. We believe in this word, this dirty word now, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or critical race theory, as the attorneys would say. And even when I was in college some time ago, and you would read those books about it, right? And when they were having those conversations, you're like, that's not what it really is about. But if that's what they're saying, but they're changing the narrative. But what we have to do is keep the narrative the same, the true narrative of what it means, right? And what it means to folks. And then I'm also going to go a little bit off script. I work for Disability Rights North Carolina, and so I see it from a disability lens. about how the world has to be totally inclusive, right? You might say, why would you talk about it that way? Because it's all of our identities, wherever our identities are, right? How they intersect with us. Because it talks about where we can be. And we have to embrace the thing with American history is, or America is, it embraces everybody's identities. Supposed to, as Carol would say. But I would say it offers that moment. In most parts of the world, they don't have that moment to embrace it. But within the words of the American Constitution, it says those things to me. Despite all that it didn't say, it did say that we're here together to make our world a better place. That means we've got some work to do, some voters to register, some conversations to have. As they're talking about justice and folks, we've got to talk about them too, their needs. So we've got to come together as a community at this moment to transform our communities. Because this is the fulcrum of which change happens. It doesn't happen in Washington, D.C. The change happens in your local community, right here. It happened when he was born here. And then God's able to send us places that we don't even know. But we have to be willing to be able to be sent. Are we making ourselves able to be sent by God to do his predestined destination for us? That's the question for us today. George Henry White did his. What are we going to do today? Thank you.
Amen.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm in tears. And I really have goosebumps. I really, really have goosebumps. We're gonna take maybe about 2 or 3 minutes to get Mr. Michael Connell, get him in. We have a film, a documentary that we want you guys to watch. It is entitled George Henry White, Searching for Freedom. And it was produced on PBS, and if I'm not mistaken, it was nominated for an Emmy. And it's about 40 minutes long, I think. 25. So, 25? 25, okay. So give us a few minutes and we'll get that set up for you. So don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. But you can stand up and stretch for a few minutes, okay?
Oh, okay. One thing I forgot to say, everybody, in the beginning, is that in doing this work and talking to everybody and then, studying the work of Earl and Ben and Crystal, I sort of concluded that, obviously I would never be able to talk to him, this 100 years ago or more, that I think he was, at least to me, I think he really, really loved America. And I think he really, really believed in what this country could be or wanted to be. And I sort of have that same idea. It's the land of the free and the home of the brave. And I guess that's open to interpretation of different people. And I was just going to say that's, if I could meet him, I think that would be what I would hear. Because after all that adversity, he never stops. He never gives up. He doesn't seem to get into, and it's amazing and inspiring. And I was just thinking about what Curtis was saying. Curtis, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. How he tied it in today as the moment and the historical parallels of, our media, and, all these tricks, they're old as the hills, But anyways, he's preaching the choir, but I just thought. Oh, and I did look at the numbers for the carriage. It was actually made available to 258 million people.
Wow.
And I just think that's cool. Anyway, I don't know how much, if you have any questions or.
I want to thank you for making it.
You're welcome. Oh, and this was paid for by the people of North Carolina. We didn't get, there was no big grant funding. It was your PBS network here that did it. And the voiceover is Nina Freelon. And she was amazing. And she found some mistakes in the script. Super smart lady. Kind of intimidating.
And Bernard George is the.
And Bernard George is the leads.
Out of New Bern.
I told him, no, it got nominated for Emmy, played in some film festivals, but
Big deal.
Congratulations.
I was just wondering how you chose the, because any story you can always pick and choose, like the thread, how did you decide on the thread of how you were going to tell the story?
so you all heard the question. Basically, what I did is I just tried to hit the highlights because I wanted to make it shorter. I was telling Kate, there's only 4 pictures that I could find. Maybe there's another one that I heard of this great man, and I think that just illustrates, like, why are there only 4 pictures of him? Maybe that's it. And to answer your question, so I tried to hit the highlights and took in all the information and really the historian's guide the way. And when I heard Ben speak this time, what he had in his presentation, like, oh, I kind of got all of those. So I didn't go into Philly. I didn't go into his family, his personal life, which was fascinating and kind of tragic and heartbreaking love stories. But part of the goal is also maybe somebody sees this and it inspires them to make a feature film or go deeper or,
Yes.
And part of the thing is I've realized in the modern era, if you keep it short, teachers can use a little bit in their classroom, or people don't, there's too, anyways. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
But there's always a lot of doubt. I mean, you never know. Like, oh, I missed that or this. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Stedman, too. He convinced me about the title. I was going to call it something else. Do you remember that? Yeah. And he was so gracious. Like, I was like, hey, I'm doing this thing, come up to Whitesboro, and I took the ferry across. And he didn't know who I was or what was going on.
Stedman, did you know about George Henry White growing up, or was it? Really? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Justice really is the reason why all of this happens.
So Ben, we thank you for being the instigator of all of this. We now have Kate Subata. She is going to come talk to us for just a few minutes about something that is very special and very important to us here at the George Henry White Center.
First of all, I just want to thank everyone who spoke today, everyone who came. And if you are like me, I'm one of those information sponges, and I'm sure what you have been doing is putting together all of these various pieces of information, and you're getting this mosaic, right? And the mosaic is partially, yes, it's about this man, but also it's about this legacy that has not stopped. And I had a thought before when someone was speaking, maybe it was when Curtis was speaking, and it was like, when a great man dies, he becomes like particles of him get seeded into other lives. And then we all carry it on, right? So I just wanted to mention that. I think it's just so tremendous that we're here, that we're doing all these things that concern citizens from Whitesboro and the George Henry White Bar Association, and the Phoenix Society, and the NAACP. By the way, George Henry White was one of the early co-founders of the NAACP in Pennsylvania. All of these things are things that we all can do, okay? And we cannot repeat the mistakes. We cannot sit down. We can't be the weaklings who just let the evil things go again. We've got to stand, okay? So, but what I want to share with you now is about something that's called Bubble Up. And we found out about this at the George Henry White Center. It's something that is helping us to organize material and to capture, I don't know about you, but I have thousands. I had over 180,000 files on my computer.
That's a lot.
It's a lot, right? But, and I'm just one person, right? So between all of us, I'm sure we all have like, you know, a billion times that many. But the thing is that if we don't have a way for us to easily capture that and share it, what happens to it? It gets lost. So as Mike was saying, there's only 4 pictures of George Henry White. What? We can't let that happen to Stedman Graham. We can't let that happen to Finesse Couch. We can't let that happen to Earl Ives, right? We need to capture and to be able to share important information, important photos, important videos, important research, detailed statistics, all these things. So if you all saw on your program, we were asking you to use that QR code and then to pull up, to put photos into the Bubble Up system. And so all day we've been sort of taking those photos. Yeah, there it is. Okay, see that Bubble Up, it looks like? Sorry about that. Okay, so this is actually a free app or it's a subscriber app, okay? If you want to use the free version, you can use that. There's a certain amount of terabytes. I think it's like 5 terabytes or something you can use. But if you go ahead and get the paid version, which is about $8 a month, it is going to save you hundreds of hours a month in terms of wasted time. Like, I don't know about you, but if Earl asks me, could you send me a copy of the program, then I have to go into my email, I gotta find his email, then I have to send him, you know, attach the photo, attach this, and you know what I mean? And every time you do that, that takes you time, right? This is something you can do with one finger. You can actually move it on your phone. You can have it on your phone, you can have it on your computer or whatever. So what I'm gonna try to do, if I can, is do a little magic. So while I'm trying to do that, Carol, why don't you just wrap up the program and I'll try and show what we can do with it. Okay?
So little did you all know, but Kate and I are actually twins. From the time that we met a couple of years ago, we have truly connected. It has gotten to the place sometimes where we can kind of complete each other's thoughts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. It really is. Yeah, she's strange. There's some people that we would like to recognize before we close out the program today. People in organizations that we'd like to recognize. Bladen Community College, we want to thank them for coming on board and supporting the George Henry White Center. As a satellite location, they have been supportive of our computer classes that are offered free of charge to the community. We have an electrical contractors course that has been taught, electrical beginners class, and we have a new program that we're starting, the new Ice House Entrepreneurship Program. So that will be getting started next month. So we're excited about that and the partnership that we have through Bladen Community College. We'd also like to thank the Columbus County Chamber and the Bladen County Chambers of Commerce. They have been very supportive of our efforts here at the center. We want to thank the local churches in the area in St. James, Welch's Creek, Farmers Union, Pierce's Chapel for their support, particularly with our Meals on Wheels program here at the center. We would like to thank former Sheriff Lewis Hatcher for being a part of the center in a dual role as a health center and as the home base for the Farmers Union Welch's Creek St. James Community Watch program dedicated to the safety of all the citizens living here in these 3 communities, and it was strongly supported by Mr. Hatcher when he was sheriff. We want to thank the Bladen County Sheriff's Office for their 24-hour monitoring of our property, the George Henry White Hospitality Team, which is led by Mrs. Gracie George. That you guys just need to come out here. They meet on the first Thursday of each month to plan the menu. They produce the meals on the second Thursday. The building just feels, it smells delicious. The meal is absolutely delicious. They feed me every second Thursday of each month. I love it. But they are fantastic, and they give of their time, of their talent, their treasure. This is something that is meaningful to them, and it's just absolutely wonderful. So they deserve kudos of congratulations, and they just need to be loved for what they're doing. They help the community sick and shut in, and they also help the veterans. And then we also want to thank the present Columbus County Sheriff's Office and Sheriff Bill Rogers, his commitment to the community for all the citizens living here in Columbus County and Bladen County. We want to thank all of you for what you have done here today. We ask for your continued support. Please note that the center is always looking for volunteers. We could not exist if we did not have the help of everybody involved. Whether you're here locally or if you're away, your support through your prayers, we have a donation box, as Vincent said, so however you want to support, your thoughts, your prayers, we appreciate all of that. If you haven't had a chance to look through your program booklet, I ask you to do so at your leisure, and share this book with others, because it is just, it touches my heart. I really do have goosebumps. I will not tell you a story on that. And if you look in the booklet, the last speech that Mr. White made to Congress is included in that booklet. In 1900, Mr. White advocated to get a bill passed that would make lynching a federal crime. We've been hearing about that today. On March the 29th, 2022, President Joe Biden made the following remarks. And he said, "It was over 100 years ago, in 1900, when a North Carolina representative named George Henry White, the son of a slave, the only black lawmaker in Congress at the time, who first introduced legislation to make lynching a federal crime. Hundreds and hundreds of similar bills have failed to pass. Over the years, several federal hate crimes were enacted, including one that I signed last year to combat COVID-19 hate crimes, but no federal law expressly prohibiting lynching, none until today." And that was on March the 29th, 2022, only 122 years later. Justice is slow. We can. Do you want to take over, Kate, and then I'll just kind of...
I think you need to, okay. Just what I'm showing here is photos that were taken from today, and with Bubble Up you can hit one button and it turns it into either a slideshow or a web page.
Wow.
Okay, so this is just to give you a visual example, but please keep on the message. That's
And
the
now I have that on my phone, on my Bubble Up app, the same pictures you were just showing.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we can all now share, if you go into the Bubble Up app for today using the QR code that's in the program, you will have all of these pictures and you can add your own.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kate. We cannot end today's program without reading the words of Mr. White. As I said at the beginning, I love quotes. And Mr. White said, what he said in 1901 is just as important then as it is today. As he was speaking to Congress, he said, "This, Mr. Chairman, is perhaps the Negro's temporary farewell to the American Congress. But let me say, Phoenix-like, he will rise up someday and come again. These parting words are in behalf of an outraged, heartbroken, bruised, and bleeding, but God-fearing people, faithful, industrious, loyal, people-rising people, full of potential force. The only apology that I have to make for the earnestness with which I have spoken is that I am pleading for the life, the liberty, the future happiness, and man-made suffrage for 1/8 of the entire population of the United States." Those were Mr. White's words in 1901. We thank you for coming. We thank you for braving the weather today. It's been wonderful. Please come back to see us. Thank you so much.